Good afternoon, everybody. This is going to be a bit of a different video, but one that I hope some people can get some use out of. This has been a long project in the making here, but the table you see in front of you is actually, it's just kind of a table topper, but this was handmade by my father and I. And it's, you know, basic lumber. There's nothing here super fancy, you know, but it is very functional and helps me create a really nice gaming space with a, you know, basically you can see it's sitting on top of a card table right now. There is opportunity I could add legs, but for right now, with space being a limited issue in our house, if I needed to take this down, I'm essentially in the guest room right now. So if we were to have guests, I would need to take this off, and I can easily do that. It just lifts off. It's not too super heavy. But you can see that this is essentially a 48 by 48. I think it's more like 47 and a half or something like that, but pretty square. And then the area in the center is 36 by 36. So those big, large, like fantasy flight mats and things like that can easily fit on top without reaching like the cup holders and things like that. And so you can see I have built-in cup holders. I have these little dice trays that are, you know, very handy areas to keep stuff in. And then underneath here, all of these boards lift off, and you can actually see I have Tainted Grail stored in here. So let me just take a second and pop these off. So you can see that I've got this interior surface here, and this material here is actually headliner, just black headliner. Pretty straightforward, but you could probably choose from a variety of colors. But I was able to buy headliner at our local fabric store, and headliner is the stuff that goes in the roof of your car, essentially. So it's got a little bit of sponginess to it, a little bit of give, but it's, you know, real soft, and you know, but that give allows you to pick up cards easily off of it and things like that. And you can see that this, the depth of it allows me to keep my miniatures up. My big guys here from Tainted Grail, they stick up a little bit too much, so I have to tip them over. But otherwise, I can keep Tainted Grail, which is a pretty robust game and is a long campaign. I can keep it set up indefinitely until I would need to move the table, and then just cover it up, and I can play other games, or I've been, you know, wrapping presents on this table, doing other things. My kids sit here sometimes. Sometimes I get my paints out and I paint on top of this table. So whatever game I want to keep out for a long time, I had Near and Far out for a long time. These big campaign games can just sit out, and then I cover them up. One thing that if I could change anything, I would probably not make this depth here as deep. It is plenty deep enough to fit like a standard 32 millimeter miniature. I can even fit the Four Dweller, who's, you know, closer to like a 45 or 50, I think. But it is pretty deep in there. But when I'm sitting up at the table, I don't really have any problems reaching down in there. But if stuff's like right up here, you know, I can't see like these cards as easily until I lean over. And just to give you guys a quick look of what it kind of looks like underneath here, you can see that it is essentially just a 2x4 frame with then a piece of plywood, and the headliner, you can see, is right there. The headliner is just kind of glued down on top, and then we use, you know, the screwing up into of the plywood to secure the headliner nice and tight. But that's it. Otherwise, this thing is sitting on a card table right now, and I have the card table adjusted so that everything's the right height. But you know, there is a nice sturdy 2x4 frame in there. If you wanted to attach legs to, you could very easily attach legs to them. So this introduction here is just kind of show off the finished product. If you would like to see how we went about making this, I did take some videos while we were putting it together. You know, this is a very amateur DIY project, so just keep that in mind as you're watching the rest of this video. But for those of you interested in how we accomplished this task, please continue watching. Okay, here we have the pieces cut for the interior frame. So this should create our roughly 36 by 36 inch square area that down below here we will put a piece of plywood or some other flat material that I'll probably wrap in felt or something from underneath. That'll create the lowered surface that the games and the miniatures and everything else will go into. And we decided to go with a notched approach.
Lap joint.
A what?
Lap joint.
A lap joint, I am told, where we essentially, you can see here, cut the width of a 2x4 in, and then half of the depth of the 2x4 in. And then we made a similar notch here with the table saw, and this should fit right down in here, and we're hoping this is going to be very square. Looks pretty good. And the overhang here, so this measurement right here is 4 3/4 inches, which when I tag on a 1x4 on the end here, flipped on its side, 1x6 or a 1x4 will be exactly 6 inches. And so this whole table will be 48 inches wide with an interior playing surface of 36 by 36. One thing to consider, and we're just using you know, framing lumber pine here because it was cheap. You know, make sure we're going to sand down all these, but we went ahead and sanded a lot of these surfaces. Make sure you choose you know, the best surfaces, because some of them have a lot of knots in them like this, you know, or they're tagged like this. So you're not going to see this surface, but you are going to see this side. So I made sure that the words are on the outside. We sanded everything down, then we made our cuts, and there you have it. So we're gonna secure this together and we'll come right back.
Not very many things.
Okay, so we assembled it, or you saw it go together. All we did was pilot holes and then put a screw straight down through here, and it just took 4 screws, and this thing is rock solid now. We also went ahead and attached, just going right through here, these blocks that are 4 3/4 inches long that match this depth right here. So this depth and this depth are exactly the same. What we thought of in hindsight is that we could have just extended this board out 4.5 inches and not had to tag on this. So if you learn from our mistakes, make 4 sets of 45.5 inches and notch them each like this. And then you don't, it's just 4 less things you have to attach on here. So we're gonna go ahead and sand this down a little bit and fill in these holes, and then we'll be right back.
When I attached these, in order to make sure they stayed level with the surface, I put them in place with a clamp, a 12-inch clamp initially. And then I had drilled my pilot holes, but this allowed me to put 1 screw in, and then I left it clamped to let the glue dry before I shifted the clamp to expose the upper hole. So there are 2 screws in each of these, and the clamp helped make sure that it stayed level.
And just so everybody is clear, the tops of these, everything's flush. This is all flushed out right here. This is all on the same plane. So everything right now, if you were to lay something on top of it, is a level surface. So in cutting the 1x6s that are gonna kind of be where people rest their arms, and we're gonna cut out cup holders right here and dice trays and whatnot. What we went ahead and did, and we wanted to make sure there wasn't a gap, because I originally thought, oh, I'll just put it right here, but then you could see light coming through. So we went in, that's like 3/8, not very much, but just enough. And we drew this same line across, all the way across. And so you can see this is where we are aiming the top of our 45 cut, is right here at this intersection. So it actually changes. The whole table is only going to be about 47 inches across by 47. And what we have done is we are cutting these 1 by 1. So you can see we cut that first one, and then we just cut a 45 right there. And now we are coming right here, looking for the intersection we just made. We came straight up from there, and we're running a 45 across with a speed square. That way, we're not just cutting everything at the length we think it should be. We're cutting each individual board as we go around. That way they should all fit together nicely. One thing that we thought of, just to make sure that all of these sides that we are cutting to the exact measurement, we want to make sure we put them back on the same side. So I went ahead and wrote a number 2 here, and then you can see underneath, where did I write it? A number 2 on this board. You know, on this board I did a 1 and a 1. Over there I'll do 3 and 3 and 4 and 4. That way these boards end up back on the same sides. Another thing that might come in handy is just a little block sander. You can see that the cut, because a 1x6 is going to be too wide for a standard miter saw blade, and so we had to flip it over, and I'm far from being perfect, so my dad is here with a block sander sanding down that little extra. If it's more than a sander can handle, having this is called a Japanese flush cut saw, and you can see it's a very fine blade, and it when you're cutting, it's nice and flush, so you can cut off. I actually had to do that right here. You can see again, this was a lot thicker. It wasn't even good, but this could almost go in and cut off right there. So having a Japanese flush cut saw has come in very handy. Okay, we have gotten all 4 sides cut. As you can see, everything fits real snug. We did have to take the palm sander to the corners, especially the outsides of the corners here, just to help them snug up, you know, just imperfections with the saw blade, that sort of thing. But as you can see, it's coming along. Next, we are going to mark out where we want a cup holder, probably on this side, and a rectangle for a dice tray. And we're also going to take our 1x4s. You can see there's a little gap right here. That gap's going to be filled up by a 1x4. That'll just mainly be cosmetic. It'll just create a facade, so you're not seeing the rough frame underneath. So those will be the next steps. We'll come back once we've got the cup holders and the dice trays sketched out. Okay, so we've gone ahead and mapped out where we want our cup holders and dice trays to be. We need to consider that we can't have a cup holder where these cross supports are. So we needed to make sure we came in far enough here, and same thing with the dice tray. We came over, but we tried to space them out so that the area in the middle is where people can see and reach over. So what we have done here is decided where we're going to center the cup holder. We drilled a pilot hole. We also mapped out where we want the dice tray to be, and we drilled 4 pilot holes, one in each corner. That way, when we flip this over, because we're going to need to use a jigsaw to cut out the circle and the square or the rectangle, the way the blade cuts, it's going to be a little rough at the top where the top of the jigsaw is, so we want that roughness to be on the bottom. So we're going to figure out now where all these pilot holes are drilled. Once we flip it over, we'll mark those same things on the other 3 boards, and we'll go ahead and cut them all out before we attach them down to the tabletop. Okay, so at this point we have put an initial stain on all the boards, and we went ahead and cut out our areas for the cup holder and for the dice tray. For the cup holders, we started with a 3 5/8 inch hole, and then had to enlarge it just a little bit by using a special, almost like circular sanding bit on the end of a drill bit. But you can see our cup holders here fit in there. They're nice and snug, but they do go down there, but they're not just going to pop out, or if you're pulling the table up. So they go all the way down. They're in there nice and snug. This is the, sanding style bit that we used. There we go. Put that in a drill and just ran it around to enlarge the holes just enough. And then we have gone in with an air nailer and just tacked these 1x6s down to where they need to be, lining the nail holes up with where our support beams are sticking out. You can see that it did leave little nail marks, and we're going back through and filling those with putty. And so we'll, once all this dries, we will sand back over it and, put another coat of stain on. As of right now, I'm leaving this unstained here just to see how it looks with the contrast. But this is essentially just a really thin sheet of plywood tacked up from underneath to create the bottom of the dice tray. I may think of lining it with something, but for right now, it's just stained wood with a little, or not even stained wood, with a little polyurethane. So our next step here, once we get all the holes and all the edges filled, is to cut our 1x4s that will go right here and go around the outside. There'll be more for decorative reasons, but we'll be able to put bigger, thicker air nails going into the sides here, so when people pick it up, the 1x4s and the frame will take the brunt of the weight. So that's where we are right now. Okay, so at this point we went around and filled in all of our nail holes and the cracks with some wood putty, so we can sand that down so they're not as obvious. There'll still be, the edge there. We also went ahead and cut our 1x4s to length, and even though we did our due diligence of measure twice, cut once, you can see that it's really hard to meet up 45s perfectly on edge like that. So we're just going to come back and just kind of sand down this edge. That way it's not sticking out or poking anybody, and it'll look a little nicer. And then obviously we're going to have to put a second coat of stain on all this, but that's where we are for right now. It's all coming together. Okay, so we repaired all of our areas where we had little marks from the air nailer, and we put in some wood putty here in these corners, because like this one in particular, just warping of the wood, this board is much higher than this one. We did find that having gone ahead and put a coat of stain and polyurethane down ahead of time, thinking, oh, it would just sand off and we could do it again, because I've seen a lot of people do that, put on multiple coats and sand it down, put on multiple coats, but it didn't quite turn out as nice as we would have hoped. So my recommendation to you would be to wait until the very end to stain and polyurethane everything. And we just got done putting on our fabric onto the plywood bottom. We basically used a spray adhesive and then just pulled it. It took four hands, obviously, two people. Just stretched it over there. We're just kind of letting it dry right now, and then we'll flip it over and cut it up to the edge. We'll cut all this excess off, because the way the board's going to fit up underneath here, there will be the width of a 2x4 sitting over top of this. So, how perfect we get, it's not that big a deal. We just used some standard Gorilla Glue spray adhesive here, and that's really just to keep the middle down from ever pulling up, because again, when we screw it in from underneath here, it will pinch the 2x4's frame, will pinch around the entire edge of this and keep it held in place. Okay, so while we were waiting for the glue to dry, the adhesive to dry on the essentially the bottom portion, we went ahead and cut our 3 interior pieces of wood, and you can see that we also cut a hole right here so that these can be lifted out. We did have to, since we shifted everything in, basically 3/4 of an inch, we had to, cut off the ends of each one of these boards, and then I had to rip this one in the middle, is actually slightly skinnier, but they all fit in there nicely. They drop in nicely. As of right now, there is a tiny little lip right here's difference, because this was not whitewood. This isn't the same material, but I liked the look of the kind of butcher block look. But I planned on, I did this on purpose because I plan on putting little felt circles, around on the corners, so that when it sits down, it doesn't bang down real hard. And then we just took a 1-inch drill bit and cut a hole in here to stick your finger into. Used a Dremel to clean it out a little bit, and now I'm just taking a really fine piece of sandpaper here and wrapping it around my finger, and I'll use that to clean out the hole so it's nice and smooth for when you stick your finger in there to pull out the tabletop and get down beneath. Okay, we are coming down the home stretch here. If you look closely, you can see that we cut around cut off all the excess of the headliner. That's the material we used, because it's got a nice smooth surface with a little squish underneath. Headliner is what you use, what you would put in the ceiling of your car, to kind of give it a decorative, soft feel. So they sell that at most fabric stores. We just purchased it in black. Other stores may have different colors, but you see, we just glued it down and then we cut it around, and we pre-drilled these holes back when we just had the plywood. And so there's actually already holes, you can see just barely there underneath, where every single one of these holes is already. And so we went around and we punched a hole through the headliner, so that when the screw goes in and starts to turn, it doesn't grab the fabric and twist the fabric. But we're also now using this awl to make sure that all of our holes are lined up. So we've got it set up pretty much exactly where it needs to be. We should catch all of our pilot holes just right. and we're gonna go ahead and screw down the bottom from underneath. And you can see our fabric stayed put, and as we screw these down and tighten them down, it'll be pinched basically between the plywood and the 2x4 framing and create a nice seal. So we're gonna go ahead and get this all screwed down and then we'll come back. Okay, so we've gotten it screwed down, pretty secure. One thing I did want to just point out though was that our initial screws that went in, we were using deck screws, and the heads just weren't quite as big. You can see that it went deep into our countersink, which is what we wanted, but it wasn't pulling the plywood together with the 2x4 as much as we wanted. So we ended up just bumping up the head size screws to a slightly bigger head, a number 8, and you know, you can see they're still countersunk, but they really started to pull this together, because in the end, this compression right here is what's going to hold the fabric in place. The adhesive is not going to last forever. You want to make sure that this is tight all the way around. So just make sure you pay attention to the size screw you're using, because it is going to be important. We're going to flip this baby over and take a look here now. Okay, so here we have the finished product without the topper boards. We are still sanding those down and getting them stained. Again, we cut those earlier on. We've just been sanding them down so they're nice and smooth, and then we'll stain them the same color as the rest of the wood here. But you can see what the interior portion looks like with the black headliner cloth again, and the cup holders. Nice and secure, and the little dice trays, and it's all coming along nicely. So the very last thing we have to do is just stain those top boards and then just drop them in, and then we're done. Again, this table is just going to sit on top of another table, card table, dining room table, whatever it may be for right now. You can see it's just sitting on a sawhorse. I wanted to be able to take it off and store it away, tip it up on its side and get it out of the way for needs be, because space is kind of limited right now. But down the road, we may add legs to this, and if we do, we will make another video, and you certainly could add legs to this very easily. It's pretty sturdy, but for right now, it is just a table topper. All right, guys, so there you have it. Again, that kind of journal style videoing that I did was not supposed to be a comprehensive set of instructions for putting this project together. It was just kind of to show you guys how we were working through the process. So if you have any specific questions, please feel free to send them to me. I'll do my best to answer them. This was a very fluid project, so plans were literally written down on like a scratch piece of paper, and then they changed so much that I don't really have any specific plans per se, but I could probably draw something out for someone. But hopefully the video's helped, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy board game, tabletop gaming videos, especially ones that involve storage solutions, unboxings, and the such, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.